The door to the bedroom clicked shut, sealing Kira within her designated sleep environment. Jessie remained in the dimly lit living space, retrieving his laptop from the side table. He positioned himself on the sofa, ensuring his physical presence remained a silent guardian outside her perimeter. He opened the device, the harsh blue light illuminating his focused expression. He had a specific operational directive for the evening. He needed to acquire a comprehensive understanding of the physiological and psychological parameters of autistic females. He opened a search engine and began inputting precise queries, filtering the results for peer-reviewed medical journals and clinical psychological assessments. As Jessie analyzed the data, a glaring discrepancy in the historical architecture of the research became immediately apparent. The foundational literature was inherently flawed. He discovered that the earliest, most prominent studies on the diagnostic criteria had focused almost entirely on male subjects. The initial researchers had failed to observe female subjects, creating a systemic deficit in the clinical understanding of the population. Because the baseline had been established using exclusively male variables, women were frequently overlooked, misdiagnosed, or ignored entirely by the medical establishment. Jessie cross-referenced several articles detailing a phenomenon classified as camouflaging or masking. The data indicated that autistic women were statistically highly proficient at observing neurotypical median behaviors and manually replicating them to survive social integration. This artificial replication required a massive, unsustainable output of cognitive energy, resulting in severe neurological drag and total systemic exhaustion. Jessie leaned back against the sofa cushions, processing the profound implications of this data. It perfectly correlated with Kira's historical accounts of observing her mainstream peers like an anthropological study. Her rigid routines, her strict adherence to mathematical predictability, and her reliance on a controlled physical environment were not arbitrary preferences. They were critical survival frameworks designed to bypass a society that lacked the structural data to accommodate her existence. He felt a deep surge of humility and respect for her immense resilience. He initiated a new cognitive protocol. Caleb was a credentialed psychiatric professional operating within the mainstream medical establishment. Caleb possessed the institutional access, the academic vocabulary, and the structural authority to rectify this diagnostic omission. Jessie formulated a long-term objective. He would formally request that his brother design and execute a clinical study specifically focused on the presentation of autism in adult females. It would be a logical allocation of Caleb's professional resources, and more importantly, it would validate Kira's specific operational reality on a formalized clinical level. The next morning, the atmospheric conditions inside Robin's diner were highly optimal. Jessie wiped down the stainless steel prep station with deliberate, parallel strokes, while Kira meticulously aligned the ceramic sugar caddies on the front counter. The neon maroon and yellow sign buzzed faintly in the background. "My internal baseline has achieved optimal restoration," Kira stated, placing a final pink packet at a perfect 90-degree angle to its neighbors. The 8-hour sleep cycle effectively neutralized the residual friction from the Winnipeg extraction. "I am highly pleased to confirm your metrics are stable," Jessie replied, his tone matching her precise, measured cadence. He found immense comfort in utilizing her communication style. It was a secure linguistic perimeter they shared. "During your sleep cycle, I executed a comprehensive data query regarding your specific diagnostic parameters. I located a massive structural failure in the historical medical literature." The foundational researchers entirely failed to catalog female variables. Kira paused, her hands resting flat on the cool countertop. "That explains the vast inefficiency of the median population's understanding. If the data set is corrupted at the foundational level, the resulting social architecture will inevitably be flawed. Correct, Jessie affirmed. Therefore, I intend to deploy Caleb's psychiatric credentials. I will instruct him to initiate a formal study on the female autistic baseline to correct the global data deficit. Kira's hazel eyes widened slightly, and a genuine, mathematically symmetric smile formed on her face. That is an exceptionally logical utilization of his professional capacity. It will yield highly beneficial data. At precisely 12 o'clock, the brass bell above the diner door chimed, shattering the tranquil acoustic environment. The atmospheric pressure in the room shifted instantly. Darcy stepped across the threshold, bringing a rush of freezing lake wind with her. She wore a tailored wool trench coat and an expression of manufactured, condescending confidence. Her perfume, a sharp floral variable, immediately polluted the sterile scent of the diner's roasted coffee. Jessie felt a momentary spike in his autonomic nervous system, but the immediate proximity of Kira grounded him. He functioned as her rock, and a rock did not react to atmospheric turbulence. We will deploy the professional customer service protocol, Kira whispered quietly, stepping directly up to the primary register. Affirmative, Jessie replied, standing shoulder to shoulder with her. Maximum emotional detachment. We will provide zero friction. Darcy approached the counter, leaning forward to aggressively invade their spatial perimeter. Well, isn't this just a quaint little domestic tragedy? You two are still playing restaurant at the edge of the world. Welcome to Robin's Diner, Kira said, her voice completely devoid of inflection or defensive posturing. Please state your nutritional request so we may process your transaction. Darcy scoffed, rolling her eyes and redirecting her hostility toward Jessie. Jessie, you cannot be serious. You are hiding in a grease trap with a robot who barely understands basic human inflection. Don't you miss having a real conversation? Someone who actually comprehends your history. Jessie did not break his neutral physical posture. He looked at Darcy, engaged his facial muscles to produce a standardized, pleasant retail smile, and nodded once in silent acknowledgement. Infuriated by his lack of emotional output, Darcy turned her venom back to Kira. And you think you are so special because you play the quirky, fragile victim. You don't even know how to love him. You are just using him to translate the real world because you are too broken to handle it yourself. Kira maintained absolute visual neutrality. She did not process the insult as a threat, but rather as an uncalibrated emission from a highly erratic variable. She mirrored Jessie exactly, deploying a standardized, vacant smile and nodding in perfect rhythmic synchronization with him. The total absence of defensive variables created a complete social vacuum. Darcy's manufactured narrative required friction to ignite, but Jessie and Kira offered nothing but smooth, impenetrable surfaces. Darcy's face flushed a deep, blotchy red as she realized her psychological attack was entirely ineffective against their unified geometry. You are both completely insane, Darcy snapped, slamming her manicured hands on the laminated counter. She pivoted sharply on her heels and marched out the door, the brass bell chiming violently in her wake. The hostile variable has been effectively neutralized through absolute non-engagement, Jessie observed, utilizing a sanitized cloth to wipe the exact coordinates where Darcy had touched the counter. The tactic was highly efficient, Kira agreed, her breathing remaining perfectly regulated within its standard 4-count loop. Her emotional combustion was entirely contained. It burned her out rapidly. Jessie reached into the pocket of his warm winter layers as his mobile device initiated a localized haptic vibration. He retrieved the device and opened the incoming textual transmission. I have received an operational update from Sarah, Jessie announced, his brow furrowing slightly as he processed the new logistical parameters. She indicates that she and Caleb are adjusting their travel schedule. They will not arrive on Thursday. They will arrive in Gimli on Saturday, and they have secured lodging at the primary luxury hotel on the lakefront. Kira processed the chronological and geographical shift. Saturday offers a superior logistical window for our operational schedules. However, a luxury hotel introduces unregulated variables. The acoustic dampening, the density of the median population, and the social expectations of the lobby will require preliminary calculation. We have adequate time to establish the required parameters, Jessie assured her, his brown eyes warm and unyielding. I am your secure environment. We will build a mathematical framework to guarantee our mutual stability before Saturday arrives. The lunch rush at Robin's diner had officially concluded, leaving the acoustic environment in a state of manageable low-frequency hum. Outside the large front windows, the gray Manitoba sky pressed down on the frozen streets. Jessie wiped down the stainless steel prep station with steady, rhythmic motions, the warm flannel of his overshirt contrasting with the cold metal. A few feet away, Kira restocked the ceramic mugs, her hands moving with mathematical precision, ensuring each handle faced precisely 45 degrees to the right to optimize retrieval speed during tomorrow's breakfast service. Mrs. Henderson approached the counter, wiping her hands on her maroon apron. She leaned forward, her expression softening into genuine maternal concern. Kira, sweetheart, I just wanted to remind you about your doctor's appointment tomorrow morning. I've already got your shift covered, so don't you worry about rushing back. Kira paused, her hand hovering over a pristine white mug. She processed the auditory input, her brow furrowing slightly as she accessed her internal calendar. I must apologize, Mrs. Henderson. Thank you for the external prompt. The chronological data regarding that specific medical consultation entirely bypassed my retrieval system. It happens to the best of us, hun, Mrs. Henderson said, offering a warm, reassuring smile. Have you been taking your citalopram like you're supposed to? I know a change in routine can sometimes make it easy to forget. The compliance rate remains at 100%, Kira confirmed, aligning the final mug into its designated grid. The pharmaceutical distributor provides the citalopram in standardized blister packaging, commonly referred to as bubble packs. It is highly efficient. They include the iron supplement within the same daily compartment, though I have not acquired the specific biological data explaining why my system requires the extra iron. Jessie finished wiping the counter and tossed the sanitized cloth into the designated bin. He turned to Mrs. Henderson, his tone casual and open, abandoning the strict clinical phrasing he reserved solely for Kira. He understood that communicating with the median population required standard conversational variables. Where exactly is the appointment, Mrs. Henderson? Is it far from here? It's down in the city, Mrs. Henderson replied with a soft sigh, gesturing vaguely toward the southern highway. Right by the Grace Hospital in Winnipeg. It's a bit of a trek, especially with the roads starting to ice up today. Jessie didn't hesitate to alter his operational matrix. I can take her. It's really no problem at all. My car has new winter tires, and I'd prefer she doesn't have to navigate public transit or a shuttle service by herself. Mrs. Henderson beamed, reaching over to gently pat Jessie's forearm. Oh, Jessie, you are an absolute angel. That takes a huge load off my mind. Kira tilted her head, analyzing the logistical framework of the proposed transit. I must submit a query regarding this geographical inefficiency. Why are there no suitable medical practitioners located within Gimli? The town possesses a centralized hospital structure. There absolutely should be, sweetheart, Mrs. Henderson agreed, shaking her head at the systemic failure. But they keep centralizing all the specialists down in Winnipeg. It's a real shame for the folks living up by the lake. The afternoon faded into a deep, freezing twilight. At 4 o'clock, the shift ended. Jessie and Kira transitioned into their heavy winter layers, securing their coats and scarves against the bitter wind howling off Lake Winnipeg. They stepped out the back exit of the diner, their boots crunching in unison on the hardened snow. The frozen expanse of the lake stretched out to their left, a vast sheet of white beneath a bruised purple sky. As they walked toward the residential grid, Jessie shifted his communication parameters back to the secure, precise language they shared. He maintained a respectful distance, allowing the icy wind to form an acoustic buffer between them. "I must state an observational query," Jessie said quietly, his breath forming white plumes in the frigid air. "During my time residing within your apartment, I have not observed any pharmaceutical inventory. You mentioned the bubble packs earlier, but they are entirely absent from the visual environment." Kira kept her gaze fixed on the icy pavement, analyzing the friction coefficient of each step to prevent a structural fall. "That is an accurate observation. I maintain a strict storage protocol for those specific items. I keep them securely located within the primary drawer of my bedside table." Jessie nodded, processing the newly acquired data. "Is there a specific operational reason they are kept out of the main living parameters?" "They are a critical vulnerability," Kira explained, her voice steady but carrying a heavy, underlying weight. "I refer to them internally as my happy pills. I am required to ingest them every single day. If I fail to comply with the chemical maintenance, my internal baseline drops exponentially. I might become far too negative, and my emotional output would register as entirely uncalibrated to the median population." She paused at the corner of the street, waiting for a passing snowplow to clear the intersection. The harsh grinding of the blade faded, leaving only the whistling wind. "If my emotional variables become unmanageable, the government might determine I am structurally unfit for society. They might initiate procedures to put me away. The host aunties have threatened institutionalization previously. The pills guarantee I remain a tolerated variable." Jessie felt a profound surge of protective warmth radiate through his chest, entirely counteracting the harsh Manitoba cold seeping through his winter layers. The raw vulnerability of her confession proved just how deeply she trusted him with her most sensitive data. He stopped walking and turned to face her. His brown eyes were completely unyielding, serving as the solid rock she required to anchor her floating anxieties. He kept his hands firmly in his pockets, respecting her physical boundaries while delivering his absolute vow. "I will establish a permanent, non-negotiable parameter right now," Jessie stated, his voice carrying the immovable weight of absolute certainty. "I will never allow any external authority to compromise your environment. I will not let them take you away. If your baseline drops, I will simply absorb the negativity and recalibrate the space around us. You are entirely secure with me." Kira looked up, her round hazel eyes locking onto his. The tension in her shoulders visibly dissolved, neutralized by the mathematical absolute of his promise. "Your parameters are accepted," she said softly. "The data is highly reassuring." They resumed their synchronized walk toward her apartment, the heavy dread of the impending Winnipeg extraction lifting from the space between them. They were completely unaware of the shadow detaching itself from the brick alleyway behind Robin's diner. Darcy stood perfectly still behind the frost-covered structural pillar of the adjacent bakery, pulling the collar of her wool trench coat tight against the wind. Her manicured fingers gripped the edge of the brickwork as she watched them retreat into the distance. She had been waiting for Jessie to emerge alone, hoping to ambush him away from the diner's protective environment. Instead, she had acquired a catastrophic piece of intelligence. The mechanical girl wasn't just rigid. She was chemically dependent and deeply terrified of institutionalization. Darcy's lips curled into a sharp, calculated smile, her breath freezing into a white mist. She had been searching for an entry point, and now she had the key. She finally possessed the exact variables required to shatter Kira's delicate operational matrix and prove to Jessie that his new safe harbor was nothing but a fragile house of cards waiting to collapse. The waiting room of the Winnipeg Medical Facility possessed a highly sanitized aesthetic. though the fluorescent lights hummed at an irregular frequency that vibrated harshly against Kira's auditory receptors. She sat rigidly on the crinkling paper, covering the examination table, her oversized green sweater acting as a weighted, structured shield against the sterile chill of the room. Jessie stood directly beside the doorway, maintaining a relaxed, grounded physical posture to project absolute environmental security. He functioned as a thermal anchor in the otherwise chaotic space. Dr. Evans, a middle-aged practitioner holding a digital tablet, entered the room with a brief, perfunctory knock. He offered a practiced, median population smile. "All right, Kira. Everything looks perfectly standard for your annual checkup, but we do need to update your diagnostic lab work today. We'll require a standard blood draw and a routine urine sample before you leave." Kira processed the operational directive, her hazel eyes tracking the movement of the doctor. "I require precise clarification on the exact volume of the blood extraction," she stated, her voice even and strictly governed by logic. "Will the extraction compromise my physiological baseline for the return transit to Gimli? Furthermore, the insertion of the hollow needle requires a momentary override of my tactile defensive protocols." Jessie shifted his focus to the doctor, seamlessly dropping his precise clinical terminology to bridge the communication gap. "She just wants to know how many vials you're taking today, doctor, and if she needs to consume anything specific afterward to avoid any lightheadedness." "Just 2 small vials," Dr. Evans replied smoothly, tapping a series of commands into his digital tablet. "A quick juice box and a few minutes of rest, and she will be perfectly fine for the drive home." He paused, scrolling to a new digital page. "There is one other item on the docket. For your gynecological exam, my wife, Dr. Sarah Evans, handles those specific consultations for our practice. Since she isn't in the clinic this afternoon, we will have to schedule that specific evaluation for a future date." "It won't be today." The rigid tension in Kira's shoulders instantly dissolved, her breathing falling back into a mathematically predictable loop. "The deferment of that specific invasive procedure is a highly acceptable variable," she said directly to Jessie, ignoring the doctor entirely. "My current cognitive bandwidth is insufficient for additional physiological intrusions." "I concur completely," Jessie replied, his brown eyes warm and focused solely on her face. "We will allocate future bandwidth for that specific appointment when the variables are more favorable. Today's parameters are strictly limited to the laboratory extractions. I will remain within your visual perimeter during the phlebotomy." Following the successful acquisition of the biological samples, they exited the clinic. They navigated the slush-filled Winnipeg streets toward a designated Wendy's drive-thru. The fast food franchise provided a mathematically reliable culinary output. The geometric consistency of the square meat patties offers a highly predictable consumption experience, Kira observed, carefully opening the foil wrapper in the passenger seat of Jessie's sedan. The cabin heater blasted a steady stream of warmth, effectively neutralizing the freezing winter temperatures radiating against the windshield. "Agreed," Jessie said, steering the vehicle onto the northbound highway toward Gimli. "The homogenization of the franchise architecture guarantees that the nutritional data remains entirely uniform. It completely eliminates the risk of an uncalibrated sensory spike." Kira took a measured bite of her sandwich, chewing in a rhythmic pattern to ensure proper digestive sequencing. "My internal metrics are rapidly stabilizing. The presence of your vehicle acts as a mobile containment unit against the chaotic atmospheric friction of the concrete city. I will always maintain the structural integrity of our shared perimeter," Jessie promised, his tone ringing with quiet, absolute certainty. The sprawling industrial perimeter of the city gradually gave way to the snow-covered rural landscape, the vast frozen expanse of Lake Winnipeg appearing as a brilliant white ribbon on the horizon. 70 kilometers north, Darcy sat in the driver's seat of her idling luxury SUV, parked discreetly near the Gimli lakefront. The engine's low rumble vibrated through the steering wheel as she stared at the contact name glowing on her phone screen. She tapped the glass, initiating the cellular connection to Winnipeg, her mind racing with malicious calculus. "Caleb," Darcy said the exact second the line connected, her voice dripping with manufactured urgency and feigned concern. "I know you're incredibly busy at the clinic, but I desperately need your professional advice. It's about Jessie." A heavy, frustrated sigh echoed through the vehicle's Bluetooth speakers. "Darcy, we've talked about this multiple times. Jessie explicitly told me not to provide you with any operational updates regarding his location. He is doing fine. You need to let this go." "It's not him I'm worried about, Caleb. It's her," Darcy pressed, her manicured nails tapping a harsh rhythm against the dashboard. "I just found out that she's entirely dependent on a prescription medication called citalopram. What happens when an autistic person misses a dose of something like that? Doesn't it cause severe negativity and complete emotional collapse?" Caleb's tone instantly hardened, shifting from sibling annoyance to a rigid professional boundary. "Citalopram is a standard selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. Yes, abrupt cessation can cause withdrawal symptoms or a severe depressive recurrence in absolutely anyone, including a person with autism. But that is absolutely none of your business. Why are you digging into her private medical history?" "Because Jessie is trapped in a pathetic, unsustainable delusion, Caleb," Darcy snapped, dropping the facade of concern. "He actually thinks he can play nursemaid to a broken, chemically dependent robot." "Leave her alone, Darcy," Caleb commanded, his voice echoing with genuine, protective anger. "Jessie has established his boundaries. I strongly suggest you respect them before you do irreversible damage to everyone involved." The line went dead with a sharp electronic click. Darcy slowly lowered the phone, her reflection catching in the rearview mirror. Caleb's warning had achieved the exact opposite of its intended effect. The psychiatric confirmation of the withdrawal symptoms was the final, devastating piece of the puzzle she needed. The mechanical girl wasn't just socially rigid. She was entirely reliant on those little chemical stabilizers to function in the median population. Darcy looked out at the freezing, desolate lake, her mind calculating the logistical parameters of the upcoming weekend. The family dinner at the luxury hotel was scheduled for Saturday. Jessie and the girl would be thrust into a highly stimulating, unfamiliar social environment. If Darcy could find a way to access the girl's apartment while they were distracted, or intercept the blister packs during their transit to the hotel, she could introduce a critical mathematical failure into the girl's rigid routine. All she had to do was quietly remove the pills from the equation. Once the chemical baseline collapsed, Jessie would finally be forced to witness the chaotic, unmanageable reality of the burden he had chosen, and he would come crawling back to the normal world.